Firstly, my thanks to CII for this opportunity and this pioneering initiative of trying to focus on agri supply chain, and thanks to support of all the players, including NBHC. So I'm just going to give a few thoughts. Since I've been looking at agri supply chains for quite some time, though not with this focus that our dignitaries on the table are bringing in, which I think is a very critical complement. Yeah, so just to begin with a few success examples that many of us would be familiar with. So, like agri, maybe the grain or whatever is implicitly being implied here, we've done, I would say, quite well in milk. And, the whole reforms, initiative, maybe a missionary zeal, whatever went behind it, I think to a large extent we've cracked the milk supply chain over maybe 60 years. Just to leave you with the thought that some of the success attributes behind it, one is the managing of the working capital, the cash. The farmers get their payments almost within a few days after they supply milk. Quality assessment right from source and ensuring quality is retained through the chain. Well, actually looking at the supply chain, even in a larger sense, where can I improve yields? Can I, improve practices? So development of key inputs. And I guess underlying all this, a sense of bringing about aggregation. Because I think in India, fundamentally, the legacy in almost any sector, and definitely in the agri sector, is small, marginal. So an organization like Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation, NDDB, so that's what they have brought together. Yeah, so that's your collection center, all the way to the end retailing now, they've sort of got the supply chain in place. Here's one by an organization like Marico, which has won quite a few awards in the way they have turned around the procurement of copra, which that's their largest, be it edible oil or hair oil. So they actually, at some stages, being one of the larger players, they were feeling vulnerable to the intermediaries, and then realized that they probably have enough strength to actually cut away from the intermediaries and go direct to the producers. So disintermediation, because in a sense they themselves were a major aggregator, Marico. Focus on quality by working with the coconut growers, the copra processors, telling them what is the quality they expect, and then expecting self-regulation of quality. And also aggregation, where the farmers are small farmers, then they set up these collection centers where at least the loads would move from sort of bags into a truckload. That's an example of a collection center in Kerala that moving further downstream on the agri supply chain, I would say an example of one of the very successful social projects in the country, that's the midday meal scheme, where now you're talking food. And, while of course government started disaggregate, every school trying to do its own kitchen, and but if you really see in terms of quality and even cost per unit of supply, and maybe prevention of leakages, more successful models have been where the government has brought in a form of partnership And one of the successful partnerships, I would say, one which we had a chance to study is, say, Akshaya Patra, which is, the ISKCON's outfit. Again, here, aggregation, because their centralized model, so procurement of all the inputs, centralized processing, high-tech processing, and then, of course, distribution to the schools. So, again, quality, there is studies have shown that customer satisfaction, children's satisfaction, the centralized model with partnership is working much better. Yeah, we've heard about the food security supply chain. Well, again here, I think government has done extremely well from the 60s, when we were ship to mouth, creation of the Food Corporation of India, aggregator. And in a sense, with the minimum support price and, a variety of initiatives that were very critical at that time, we've sort of managed to not having to import food to becoming self-sufficient and maybe even occasionally being able to export food. Of course, today on this food security dimension, not production security as much as distribution security, meaning, food to the poor, and the challenge today is it food security or is it nutrition security? I mean, do we need to go beyond just the food that the public distribution system offers? And then when I look at the demand, there are probably two kinds of demands. One is the routine, which is to the poor through the public distribution system, and the other is the disaster. So when there are disasters, floods, earthquakes, or man-made disasters, how do we ensure food reaches those who otherwise would not get it? On the routine side, today I think the big initiative which can be a game changer is direct benefits transfer, where government itself does not have to do the entire physical process, because that comes with its own distortions, leakages, whatever, and rely on a fairly well-established private distribution system with only the end user getting the financial subsidy to, for the food that they would pick up. Of course, for the disaster side, the physical movement would still have to be the government's responsibility. And then the question is, the strategic reserve, and then I would go beyond. It's not just basic food grains, even product types. You want to do airdropping of food. You want, you got to even worry about packets that don't break when you drop from the helicopters or whatever. So the whole chain there needs to be thought through. And I think there's a fair bit of work that's there in that domain. Of course, then you have the buffer stock norms and storage and movement, moving from bagged to bulk, and maybe even reach of procurement, because in India, procurement is lopsided. Just Punjab, Haryana, maybe now Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh picking up, but there are huge opportunities in Northeast and, maybe Western parts and so on, which will reduce logistics costs quite a bit. And then not just rice and wheat, where officially MSP exists for so many other commodities, but doesn't really get operationalized. And then, of course, there are other supply chains, export supply chain, where again, quality would be the mantra, and, how well placed are we. Import supply chains, if we get varieties that are not subject to seasonality, increasing the sugar production season, or, and so on. Of course, bulkiness is basically water, and I guess issues of, do I also want to transport water along with the product, or dehydrate, rehydrate? I mean, there are then perishability. So these are intrinsic to agriculture, and of course, as a consequence of it, quality, and then risk. And I guess that's where role of a variety of support systems become very important. How do you keep the quality up, and how do you de-risk? Of course, it's a system with multiplicity of actors, like in any supply chain, and added by the fact that many of the actors are large in number, highly disaggregated, especially at the farm level or market intermediary level, even at a processor level, many times retailers and of course, many of us would come in the infrastructure service provisioning context of this supply chain. It's great that CII, which is like an industry representative, has taken this initiative. And just to leave with the couple of thoughts as to what should be our way forward, at a very more macro level right now. And I guess the remaining sessions hopefully will continue the discussion and get us some more micro-level perspectives. So I guess disaggregation is the reality. I mean, disaggregated context is the reality, and therefore principles of aggregation is the primary mantra as a key driver in any manner of intervention in this sector. So be it, at the farmers and the FPOs that could help. Intermediaries, again, how can we integrate or aggregate better across them, aggregate better across transporters, across warehousing. So I have lots of localized warehouses, but can there be, brands like in the NBHC and others who can provide a front and a quality leveraging that, and so on. And of course, therefore, regulation, standards, working out processes and standards around it, and of course infrastructure become critical. And in that context, the support systems, again, infrastructure, which we'll move into that session soon enough, and markets, information technology, of course, becomes critical. Financial systems, be it insurance or collaterals or, just financing, futures, standards and regulation, and institutions. So let me leave this as a set of thoughts for us to go by as we go into the remaining sessions. Thank you very much.